Hello there. Thanks for watching and listening. This time I'm starting a new issue from Road and Track. It's from the July 2018 edition. Hope you're enjoying this and let's get it going. The helmet. From the rudimentary headgear of racing greats like Juan Manuel Fangio or Sterling Moss to the full face, high tech protectors of today, helmets are visible markers of the evolution of motorsport. They've helped stem the tragic attrition once commonplace in racing, while serving as banners of arms for its most memorable players. But they aren't done evolving. Each year they become lighter, stronger, safer, and so the story of the sport continues to be written on the helmet. Hard-headed history. Following World War II, makeshift helmets began appearing on F1 grids. For a while, repurposed military and Air Force headgear was the norm. In the 50s, Fangio and Moss wore helmets of compressed cork fashioned for equestrians by English hatmaker Herbert Johnson. With time, that design grew a tough plastic shell, like a hard hat. In 1956, while wearing such a helmet, William Pete Snell rolled his Triumph TR2 at a Sports Car Club of America event in California. Snell's helmet, state of the art at the time, failed to prevent a fatal head injury. The Snell Memorial Foundation, incorporated in 1957, has set safety standards for helmets ever since. Safety icons. The helmet has long been used as a canvas. Certain drivers, like Jackie Stewart, became synonymous with their liveries. Everybody in Scotland has a tartan, he says. The Stuarts were a royal clan, and the Royal Stuart was a real tartan for going into battle. My wife, Helen, bought a yard of silk in Royal Stuart, and can you imagine, a yard could not go all the way around the helmet. But we couldn't afford another yard of expensive silk. So, to begin with, we stuck the silk on with glue, and then put nail varnish on it, so it wasn't going to be taken off with rain. I still wear that tartan on my helmets to this day. Bell introduced the first full-face helmet in 1968. Dan Gurney wore it in the Indianapolis 500 and German Grand Prix that year. The head and neck support, or Hans device, invented in 1984, anchors to the base of a helmet, dissipating crash forces to a shoulder restraint. The device protects vulnerable neck and skull bones in a collision. CART became the first major race series to mandate the equipment in 2001. Progress and personalization. Materials advancements, including carbon fiber, Kevlar, and polyethylene foam, have made helmets lighter, stronger, and more comfortable. Creature comforts like air conditioning and water lines ease driver fatigue. Yet other things remain the same. Liveries are often painted by hand and, despite sponsor encroachment, remain an expression of drivers' personalities. Even as the helmet becomes safer, the very act of donning one is an acknowledgement that risk will always be part of racing. The editor's letter. In an automotive landscape littered with cars seemingly cast from the same handful of molds, it's become increasingly tough to stand out, delivering something different. When the marketing people are demanding you to build what is already on every driveway, requires thinking outside the box. Or, at the very least, playing with the design and performance of the box to set it apart in a sea of sameness. The case in point in this month's cover car, the Lamborghini Urus. St. Agata's self-proclaimed supercar of SUVs takes aim at a popular segment, yet it promises to deliver a driving experience worthy of its legendary badge. Alfa, Bentley, Porsche, and most recently Rolls-Royce have tried to deliver distinctive experiences wrapped in a crossover shape with varying degrees of success. Now it's Lamborghini's turn. To help distinguish between perception and reality, contributing editor Jason Harper takes the Urus to task bull market, exploring whether it's possible to be a genuine Lamborghini and a viable SUV. Spoiler alert, it has, and it's super popular today. Similar musings could apply to another go-fast utility vehicle, the Mercedes-AMG E63 S-Wagon. But any true enthusiast already knows the answers. Yes, it's suitably luxurious. Yes, it's more than worthy of an AMG badge. Yes, it's utterly unlike any other vehicle on the market. And yes, any of us would give our right arm for one. And my right foot. Mercedes makes no excuses for stuffing 603 horses under the hood of a full-size luxury station wagon. In the bizarre automotive dreamscape in which this blindingly fast vehicle resides, it makes perfect sense. Contributor Brett Burke scorches 900 miles of California asphalt to uncover the mystique behind this magical beast. No stranger to the unconventional, contributing editor Jack Ruth steps well outside his comfort zone to pilot a 700 horsepower sprint car around a fifth-mile dirt oval and quick and dirty. More at home on scenic road courses than concrete-lined bull rings, Jack quickly discovers that there's more to sprint cars than simply sliding around in circles. There's dirt to read, walls to hit, and a lifetime's worth of deeply ingrained road racing habits to toss out the window. But even this old dog learns a few tricks in pursuit of the perfect lap. While evolution may improve the breed, it's the bold moves that makes us smile. The stylish and playful hatch, the light on his feet family sedan, or even the occasional SUV with more S than UV. Vehicles that skillfully stray from convention just enough to keep perception observers on their toes and remind us all to keep an eye out for those hidden gems. Smithology by Sam Smith, My Dinner with Mach, Sacrifice, Le Mans, and Dessert. You meet people in this job. I first met Mark Webber in college, though, watching F1 on TV. Maybe not so much as shouted at, cross airwaves and distance. His car would come on screen and my friends and I would yell, Mach Webber, in this terrible fake Australian accent every lap. Possibly because Webber is Australian. Also, at least I paint an incomplete picture, because we were idiots. And then I met him for real, several months ago in the Algarve region of Portugal that looks a lot like Southern California. Portuguese water dogs hail from the Algarve. So does Bonnie Taylor, who sang Total Eclipse of the Heart. She lives there part of the year and thus bears a resemblance on paper to the average German car executive. Every Teutonic car suit I've met has loved Portugal in the winter and seemed ported in from the video for an 80s power ballad. German car companies launch cars in Portugal for the same reason that American car companies launch cars in California. It's convenient, and the heart of the machine is unlikely to be eclipsed. Good roads, good weather, close to home. Weber, now retired from driving, has become a Porsche brand ambassador. Like me, he was in the Algarve for the launch of the 2018 911 GT2 RS. The event dinner, those things always have dinners, was preceded by a cocktail hour. I didn't recognize him at first. Back to the crowd, talking with a few engineers. He looked like any other unreasonably healthy person, with nice clothes and shoulders like cut glass. Being a person of both class and taste, I daydreamed about throwing a pie at his head on principle. Then he turned around. A voice in my head apologized to no one in particular, then hollered like a dingus, Mach! He sat down at my table. We fell into conversation. The man gamely answered questions about Le Mans. He drove a Porsche 919 there from 2014 to 16, plus supercars and the off-record oddities of F1. He told several bougie and charming stories that alluded to this kind of life you'd expect from one of the planet's premier pro athletes. He was about to hop a plane to Asia, he said, for a WEC race. He was saving to buy a piece of land in New Zealand, large and green, where he could build a dirt bike track and keep a stack of KTMs. He talked about his various 911s, a 2.7 RS, a 997 GT2 RS. It was the kind of discussion where you find yourself reveling in someone else's success, but also feeling increasingly silly about any life choices that kept you from, say, getting paid to see the world from inside a multi-million-dollar piece of carbon fiber. Halfway through the meal, I asked him questions that prompted a long answer. Weber picked at a salad and began talking. I slowly buttered a piece of bread and considered his words, plus my vanilla pudding abs and the physical rigors of being a contractually obligated pro driver. The butter was salty and warm and spread like cake icing. The bread smelled like campfire. The crust crackled in my fingers and left bits of carbonized flour on the plate. His body is almost surely a temple, I thought. What a pain in this keister it must be. My body is also temple, but has graffiti on the walls and a few moldy takeout boxes on the front steps and maybe a weathered sign out front reading, No trespassing, hazardous radiation. I eat things, not always with good intentions. I exercise, but rarely enough. The butter did that fresh butter thing, where the smell reverses through your nose and wafts around your head as you chew. We discussed the nature of sports cars, old and new. How much testing it took to make the 919's headlights to work at 210 miles an hour. A usable pattern that didn't blind traffic. So much frustration, the drivers joked about folding a team engineer into the car's dinky cockpit, just to show how challenging it was and how little they could see. I conducted a brief mental tally of the endurance races I've been fortunate enough to enter. None produced 200 miles an hour. Certainly not at night. I think I saw 120 in a Plymouth Neon at Buttonwillow at 3 a.m. once. I always liked Le Mans, Weber says, but I never came to love it. You do not hear those words without asking why. It was too French. But your senses are so heightened. You smell everything from the car, even trackside barbecues. If someone goes off, you can smell the grass. Even on the Mulsanne? Speed didn't matter. It was always there. My mind vapor-locked, a mash of envy and dreamy France smells. They brought dessert without asking. A small army of waiters, plates at shoulder height, 2 cones of ice cream, hollow centers in a bowl. Then a tureen of fresh strawberry syrup, thick as lava. It fell over the ice cream in slow motion, layering crimson. Weber watched as the waiter poured his, a pained look. A third waiter appeared, noticing the stress. There was a short, hushed discussion. It was made clear that the plate would find another table, maybe the kitchen. Someone would eat it. The dish disappeared. Weber's shoulders relaxed. I stared at my cones. I briefly toyed with the idea of not eating them. I flash back at the fastest thing I'd ever driven, a 1990s GTP prototype I tried at Laguna Seca. Downforce like an F1 car. After a few laps, my muscles were so weak they might as well have been hit by a train. My arms could barely turn the wheel. Out of shape. Could be skinnier. Then I realized that my spoon was already full of strawberry goo and halfway into my mouth. It was delicious. First drive of the 2019 Lamborghini Yaris, the bull market. As the masses clamor for crossovers, Lamborghini jumps in horns first. Your impression of the Urus will come not down to how much you romanticize Lamborghini. A dispassionate, engineering-minded driver would step away and proclaim the Yaris as a highly competent and speedy SUV, undeniably impressive as an entirely new undertaking for a company that sells a limited number of cars. Such a person might also note that the Urus has many mechanical and architectural similarities to Volkswagen Group stablemate, a big reason it's so competent out of the gate, yet still feels distant. On the other hand, for a person who innately and perhaps naively believes a brand is more than some of its vehicles, and who tends to consider a company's history paramount, driving the Urus might cause unease. That person would be me. I'm no purist. Lamborghini's history is interesting, but doesn't quite rival some of the greatest automotive stories, like the Maserati brothers, the Ford family, or the singular Enzo Ferrari and his obsession with racing. Nor am I bothered by the fact that the company has produced a utility vehicle. The masses want them, even though in this case, it's actually only the 1% of the masses who can fork over 200,000 large. And don't forget, Lamborghini created what is arguably the first ever exotic SUV, in the fitful form of the desert-trunching 1986 LM002. Walk around the original LM002 though, and it still comes off as unhinged, with outrageous scale and dimensions. Not so with the Urus. Character lines pressed into its skin suggest muscular haunches and sucked in sides, but in fact, those angles are mostly optical illusion. The sides of the Urus are nearly flat, and there's not much extra bulge around the fenders. The hood is high and drops off as sharply as the cliff in Wile E. Coyote's cartoons. Had the Lambo crew been given reins to base the Urus on a bespoke platform, it surely would look different. Instead, with the understandable necessities of cost efficiencies and German pragmaticism, the Urus is based on architecture that underpins several close cousins, including the Audi Q7 and upcoming Q8, the Bentley Bentayga, and the Porsche Cayenne. As such, there are a number of fixed points that could not be messed with, such as where the front wheel sits in relation to the windshield and the placement of the engine. Think of it like a cheekbones and brow lines. Even with a different nose, chin, and eye color, there's a family resemblance. The Urus differentiates itself through its width and having fenders so large they accommodate optional 23-inch wheels. The vents on the front fenders and rear aren't functional. One real aero trick is in the underbody, where a flap sends air to cool the gargantuan 17.3-inch carbon ceramic brake rotors, replete with 10-piston calipers. Ah, there's a bit of a throwback. Lamborghini insanity. 10-piston front calipers? Lambo also claims that the Uruses are the largest rotors ever put onto a production vehicle. The interior, with a slick dual digital screen center console and excellent build quality, is a delight. New tamburo, or drum, controls, which allow the driver to tab through sport, track, and off-road modes, are intuitive and handsome. There is a real sense of drama here. The sheen of the materials and the usual Lamborghini details, like the missile flip switch on the ignition and the hexagonal air vents, combine for a bit of theater otherwise lacking on the outside. One Urus we tested came out with a mix of baseball mitt leather, Alcantara, and carbon fiber. This is a company at the top of its interior game. The block of the V8, Lamborghini's first one with turbos, is out of the VW Group vaults, as is the ZF transmission case. Lambo added a much larger twin turbos inside the cylinder banks, along with hotter cams and cylinder heads. The 4-liter puts out 641 horsepower and a knockout 627 pound-feet of torque at only 2250 RPM. All that power takes the Brute to 62 miles an hour in 3.6 seconds, Lamborghini says. Redline arrives at 6,800 RPM, 1,700 RPM sooner than the V12 and the Aventador S. Top speed is 190 miles an hour. Just imagine the wind noises as it punches such a massive hole through the air. We drove the Urus, riding on Pirelli P0 Corsa tires at the Villa Lunga circuit outside Rome. We also did a loop on potholed lanes nearby, but the tires wore regular P0s. Pirelli Scorpions are available for off-road duty. In the real world, speeds were frustratingly limited by Sunday drivers and routes through narrow villages. But the drive did prove a point. With the adjustable air suspension set to Strada, street mode, the Urus absorbed lumps brilliantly, softening the brittle asphalt even with its 22-inch tires. Inside any other Lambo, we would have gone stir-crazy, but in laid-back mode, the Urus is resolutely grown up. Interestingly, it didn't get a lot of love from locals. Despite the bright yellow paint, perhaps they didn't hear us. The Urus makes sufficient sound when pushed, mostly of the bass-laden, growling kind, but there's no Venn diagram where the SUV's exhaust note and the Aventador's overlap. It isn't the sound of a Lamborghini. Engineers point specifically and heatedly to California's noise restrictions. In a few places, when not stuck behind a warbling Fiat, we kicked the accelerator and the V8 instantly spooled up to lob us fast and hard down the road. Make no mistake, the Urus is genuinely quick. It's just a different kind of quickness, coming from a wash of low-end torque rather than that gradual build of a naturally aspirated engine. By default, 60% of the torque is sent to the back wheels via a torsion center diff, but the rear bias can be as much as 87% when circumstances call for it. The diff and traction control settings modulate behavior in sand, gravel, and snow modes. The Urus also has mechanical rear wheel torque vectoring and rear wheel steering at its disposal, requisite tools of the trade when you want an oversized vehicle to handle like a smaller, nimbler one. A track session in a fast SUV is a bit like kissing the just friends date you brought to prom. Fun, but not as much as if you asked who you were really crazy for. A track date with a Lamborghini is something to be excited about. Yet, faced with the reality, you can't help but wish that it were a session with a Performante and not a high-riding crossover, no matter the horsepower. Villalonga has a long, discomforting straight with a dip that compresses the suspension. The Urus stormed through, flat out, with nary a tremor. Its He-Man carbon ceramic soaked up the deep, hard braking before a compromise right-hander, which the SUV handled just as ably. It then downshifted right before touching the next curb and blasting down the following straight. There are two spots on the track that virtually beg you to overstep into them and suffer understeer, even those it handled nicely. Steering is light and precise, though feedback is faint. This amount of capability requires complex electronic systems to work: four-wheel steer, traction control, and active anti-roll bars. But none of that churn comes through to the driver's seat. You just feel like you're a highly capable driver who has no issues hustling some 4,900 pounds of aluminum, steel, and carbon fiber through a complex of tricky turns. I learned the most about the Urus while driving for photography. Most on-track photos came via countless passes on the same corner. Rather than go all the way around the empty track each time, I'd do a U-turn. The Urus's turning radius is vast, so I'd manhandle it around and then sprint along a bank turn, going the long way, then hammer on the brakes before flipping around again. Pushing the Lamborghini harder with each repeated pass, about 25 in all, several things became evident. The first was the tenacious grip and overall stability, which allowed the Urus to bang through turns as if it were a much lower, lighter sedan. More specifically, what leaped out was its ability to handle lateral loads, especially on the bank turn. Credit goes to the Pirelli Corsas and their sidewalls, a true feat of engineering. But the greatest and most effective bit of kit on the Urus may be something we never actually see: those active anti-roll bars. This technology comes from Porsche, and it requires a 48-volt electrical system to power two separate electric motors. Under these demanding situations, the anti-roll bars stiffen to keep the Yaris remarkably flat. They can also decouple for off-road driving to increase wheel articulation and keep the tires in contact with the earth in off-road situations. Lamborghini gave us a brief taste of the Urus's off-road chops by carving a looping rallycross-style track around Villalonga's perimeter. It was made of soft dirt and designed to carry a mediocre of speed, with sections that required hard braking. The layout was telling. Even the off-piste driving was intended to be hard and fast. Rock crawlers need not apply. You won't see a Urus on the Rubicon Trail. With the SUV set to Terra or the off-road mode, and a nervous Italian co-driver in the passenger seat, I kicked dirt up and down the hills. The Urus was surprisingly competent. Just brake early and turn in early, then apply throttle and get the rear end to slide. Traction and stability control stayed out of the way, and the brakes worked really well. Lamborghini entering the crossover fray only fuels the argument about whether these high-riding heavy vehicles can be deemed proper performance cars. Simple answer: yes. Its muscle more than qualifies. If you're the type who demands Lotus purity, then the Urus surely falls out of that paradigm, but then so does the BMW M5. And the Urus is at least as enjoyable to drive as the last gen M5. I can imagine taking it on a long overland trip, perhaps with mountains at one end and ocean on the other, and hundreds of miles of dirt and gravel roads in between. The deeper question is whether that's enough. Lamborghini calls the Urus the world's first super sport utility vehicle. Yet that benchmark is already quite high. The BMW X6M was one of the first track-oriented SUVs that left us grasping for answers. How had BMW mitigated the higher center of gravity and all those troublesome pounds? Since then, the wonderment has dissipated. We've driven many other fast SUVs, including the 550 horsepower Porsche Cayenne Turbo and the 505 horsepower Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio, which somehow managed a 7-minute, 51.7-second dash on the Nürburgring. The Urus, while impressive, doesn't plow past those vehicles with its performance, nor does it fry your senses, as would an Aventador. and that's what's bothersome. So far, 68% of orders have come from customers new to the brand. If the first Lamborghini you drove was a Urus, you wouldn't experience any of the noise, the sensationalism, the tear-your-face-off nature of a Countach or a Huracan. For a half-century, Lamborghini has stood for what is different. The company championed madness, snargly mid-mountain V12 spaceships with outlandish designs. They are always audacious, and we love them for it. Which brings us back to that driver who wonders whether Urus, good as it is, stands for its brand's core values. That person will likely say no. Quick rundown on the 2019 Lamborghini Urus. Base price is estimated at $202,000 using a 32-valve 4-liter twin-turbo V8, 641 horsepower, 627 pound-feet of torque through an 8-speed automatic all-wheel drive, weighing in at about 4,900 pounds, estimated 0 to 60 time of 3.4 seconds, with a top speed of 190 miles an hour. The Road Trip, Little Things by Sam Smith. I told her we were going for ice cream. I didn't tell her it was going to take 2 days of driving in a car slow as cold mud along some of the prettiest coasts in the country. We went to get ice cream. This was a reasonable act and also slightly insane. She was 4 years old and my firstborn. I was 37. I wondered if she would be into cars but didn't have any evidence, so I decided to gauge her in the simplest way possible, taking a weird, affordable classic on a quick errand. From our home in Seattle to Tillamook, Oregon. 230 miles if you avoid the interstate. Tillamook is home to Tillamook Creamery, a dairy on the Pacific Ocean. I told her we were going to go get ice cream. I didn't tell her it was going to take 2 days in a car slow as mud along some of the prettiest coasts in the country. The car was a 1972 Citroen 2CV. I borrowed it from my friend Greg Long. Greg has 3 grown sons, none into cars. When asked to use his Citroen, he didn't blink. You had me at convert my kid to a car person. I failed 3 of 3 and so must support early intervention. Funny how some things just don't need explanation. My daughter's name is Marion. Seeing the car in our driveway, she paused. Looks like a bug. People call these things tin snails, I said. She jumped up and down. A snail bug. I love ice cream. It's pretty. Does it go fast? No. It's very slow. Some old cars don't go fast but feel fast, which makes them fun. She took a moment to process this. I'm gonna go tell Mama. She needs to know. She ran into the house and came back 10 seconds later, dragging her sister Vivian, who was 2. Vivian's eyes lit up. She should ride in it, Marion said. I can ride with her because she might be scared. Yeah, I am scared of tigers. Yeah, I am scared of tigers, Vivian said, raised eyebrows. She then turned on a heel and scampered back to the house, as if to say, I have had enough of that. Marion gave chase, arms in the air. It isn't a tiger, sweetie. It's just an old car that goes very slow. Come back. I briefly pondered the incomprehensible nature of children. Old and slow is a 2CV in a nutshell. You could also call it the French Volkswagen Beetle, an affordable bolide that put thousands of people on wheels after World War II. The name stands for Deux Chevaux Vapeur, or 2 steam horses, after the car's original text category. I'm sure I said that wrong. 2CVs offered 375cc and 12 horsepower when production began in 1948. Greg's had a staggering 602 horsepower and 29 horsepower. Early 2CVs were so simple they didn't have shock absorbers. The body is a steel pup tint, all exposed welds and tubing. The engine moans like an industrial generator. The dinky suspension gives sailboat qualities of heel and even a slow lane change. The sum combines the operating cost of a small toaster with the ride of a 50s Cadillac, married to that distinctively French notion that driving can be a space between spaces, a breather from daily life. Some people poo-poo 2CVs for being slow and funky. Those people can go sneeze up a rope. Few things are as goofball joyous as driving a 2CV balls out while being outrun by drivers in the slow lane, like a Spec Miata. It's a sort of a sack race on wheels, where the car's limitations are half the point, and so obvious even kids pick them up. She asked about speed a lot. Reality check. This is a person who once took 40 minutes to eat a sandwich because she said it was her friend. Why can't we pass that car? I thought for a second. We don't have enough room to get up to speed, and the wind slows us down. I would like to go faster than the wind, she says, matter of fact. A pause to look out the window thinking, this is the funniest day ever in the whole world for me. Why? I got my hopes up. Because I get to sleep in a hotel. This car is weird. We've been driving a long time. When do we get ice cream? Western Washington. Inlets, weaving valleys, stacked firs, mountains poking through the clouds. Lodging mills with shorn trees long as a school bus. In the port town of Shelton, Marion sang a song about her toes. She sang it to a small stuffed sea turtle she had brought along. I had that moment where your stomach goes all tingly and you want to hug someone until they pop. I never pictured myself as a parent. The process sweeps you up in a flush of hormones and universal emotion. Also, this looming curiosity as to whether your kid will be into the same stuff you are, so you can share it. 4-year-olds are an interesting window for that. Old enough to not be a blank slate, but young enough that they don't know how to be anyone else but themselves. All base instinct and direct questions. Large parts of a 2CV's interior are made of cardboard. Door tops suck into the slipstream when you open the dash vents. From the outside, the car looks half Victorian pram, half garden shed. People in traffic either eye you wearily as if you're selling timeshares, or they laugh and nudge a passenger. Because, look, Helen, can you believe that's an actual car? I bet that guy is fun to drink with. In retrospect, it makes sense that Marion mistook the Citroen for a Jeep. Somehow, in the Washington woods, when a late model Wrangler passed us in traffic. Daddy, look, that's the car we're driving. No, that's a Jeep. Okay, I know, it's the same car but different. I was reminded how little kids cut the world into broad categories, good and bad, fun and boring. It also occurred to me that Marion had never talked so much about cars. The coast in the Pacific Northwest is nuts. There are neon green slows, grass so vibrant it looked painted on the ground, cows grazing steps from the ocean, stacks of bundled oyster shells, bleached white by the sun, roads that loop and burst with the land, mountains to water and back again. Not like California or the East, where the landscape tends to bleed from one mood to another. She usually gets bored on long trips, descends into a nap or gets cranky. I kept waiting for it to happen, but it didn't. Just north of the Washington-Oregon border, we talked for almost 30 minutes about driving and how little girls grow up to be big girls and how big girls can drive. Feeling cheeky, I asked if she liked old cars. Her face melted into a ferocious side-eye. Too obvious. I don't know. Why? Because I don't know what to do with the weird stuff. I allowed as how life is mostly weird. The key is trying to understand it without getting too broken up when you don't. Then I let her put a hand on the wheel as I drove. It moves! More giggles. That's the steering telling us about the road. It's what makes travel fun, a sense of where you are. I am in this car with you. That's not what I meant. Daddy, you're silly. Yes, it is. 4-year-old genius. I've spent most of my life struggling to live in the moment, and the kid just knocked it out in a sentence. We sang songs, creeping up on organ. Made up songs about nothing and everything, from her stuffed turtle to the 2CV's cloth seats. We crossed the truss bridge at the mouth of the Columbia River. The mountains end abruptly at the water there, like an unfinished painting. It seemed to complement the Citroen, this relic from a time when the idea of a car was younger and less resolved. When we were mostly focused on the short view with the environment and mobility, we hadn't yet asked if the final plan for affordable human transport should include exposed welds inches from your eyeballs. Young kids are incapable of taking the long view on anything. They exist on an emotional roller coaster. Nearing Tillamook, as a joke, I offered to let Marion drive. In that way you can get a 4-year-old to believe anything if you're serious enough. Her face collapsed in horror. No, that would be unsafe. Daddy, I don't know what this car is, and I don't know how it works. I watched the highway for a moment thinking, would you like me to teach you? No. You sure? She thought for a minute, intrigued. Okay, yes. I explained the wheel and pedals. Her brow furrowed. She touched the shifter. Well, Daddy, the problem is, I don't know how this works. But we have time. Daddy, don't worry, look at my turtle. She held the stuffed turtle up in the air, 2 hands, then fell into giggles. It didn't make any sense, but I wanted to giggle a bit myself, so I did. Traffic and a few too many stops to stare at the ocean meant that we reached Tillamook after the dairy had closed. We bunked at a small hotel in a nearby village of Garibaldi. The creamery was almost empty when we rolled in the next morning at 8. Astonishingly, it was also open, if deserted. Marion got ice cream. She ate it with 2 hands. It got on her hair, face, jacket, everything. She asked if we were going home. I told her that we had to. She grinned, face smeared with chocolate. You may be wondering if this was an excuse to spend time with my daughter. Of course it was. It was also a legitimate attempt to probe a question. As we walked back out to the car, she was silent. I figured we were done. Parenting is nothing if not occasionally looking for answers that aren't there. I was merging into traffic when she touched my arm. I looked over. Her eyes were larger than usual. I figured it out, Daddy. My favorite part of the car is, it occurred to me that I might have made the point of this trip a bit blatant, even if I didn't come out and say it. What, sweetheart? It's vroo. I frowned, not sure I heard it right. Over the engine, 4-year-olds speak a lot of gibberish. Vroo? She made fists with her hands and bounced in the seat. Yeah, vroo, vroom, the fast, the fast, the fast, the fast. The bouncing stopped. Then she went back to talking to her turtle. I smiled. That's enough, I thought. All you can ask for as a parent with anything. Hope.